Welcome to The Pivot Point, stories of courage, resilience, and reinvention. I'm your host, Jessica McGann, coach, producer, and creative, whose mission is to normalize the human experience, ignite the soul, and move you from feeling limited to limitless. Stories connect us, and my hope is that within this series, you will find at least one story that resonates with you on a deeply personal level, one that speaks to your soul or your current situation that will motivate you to keep moving forward, inspire you to make bold, brave choices in your own life, and help you feel less alone in the process. In today's episode, I speak with Alana van Sluys, who once struggled with body dysmorphia and disordered eating. In this conversation and through her work as a speaker, author, and intuitive eating counselor, she vulnerably shares her experience living with an eating disorder and the pivotal moment when she looked down at her scale and it read 100 pounds. And it still didn't feel good enough. It was in that moment that she asked herself, when is it going to be good enough? And realized it probably never would be if she didn't start to ask for help and make some changes. It was in this moment that she decided enough was enough. When Alana found intuitive eating, she was able to heal her relationship to food and her body and is now passionate about helping others do the same. Today, Alana van Sluys is a certified intuitive eating counselor, TEDx speaker, eating disorder survivor, and the founder of Freedom with Food and Fitness. She is dedicated to empowering women to heal their relationship with food and their bodies, to step into their potential, take up space, and pursue true health. Her debut book, Freedom with Food and Fitness, How Intuitive Eating is the Key to Becoming Your Happiest, Healthiest Self, was released worldwide this year. She is a contributing writer for several national publications, including the National Eating Disorder Information Center and Best Holistic Life magazine. She was also most recently a panelist and speaker for the Speak Up Women's Conference and a speaker for Women Speak Up. In a world where capitalism truly monopolizes and benefits from the insecurities that women have with their bodies and men, Alana's story is an important one, and I'm excited to share it with you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Alana, I am so excited to have you here on the Pivot Point today. You've shared your story widely. It's an important story that I think a lot of people can relate to. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation with you today. And perhaps you could just start us off with who you were and what life was like for you before your pivotal moment.
Oh, so before my pivotal moment, I was in grad school and I was getting to the point where I was about to graduate with a master's degree in English education. So I was going to be an English teacher. And that can be very scary for anybody who's ever gone into education, because it's like you either get a job for September or you don't, and you don't know where you're going to get a job, and you don't know if you're going to move away from your friends and family, or if you're going to have that support system in your life anymore as you make this huge transition from, college student to all of a sudden adulthood. And I was also somebody who had also relied very heavily on external validation her whole life. I was lucky enough and blessed enough to excel in school and in extracurricular activities. And I was, I guess, conventionally pretty. And I got a lot of gold stars and praise and accolades. And it unintentionally created an environment where I didn't know how to be my own cheerleader. Like there was never like me having to give myself praise or build myself up after falling down. And while that was wonderful to get all that praise, obviously, when you're leaving school and going into the adult world, all of a sudden, it's like, where do I rank? Right? How do I know if I'm good enough? How do I know if I'm worthy enough if there's no number attached to it or award that I'm getting? And that was very scary for me. I didn't really know my place in the world in a way. So I ended up fixating on my body and my weight, and it turned what was a seemingly innocent goal weight into a much more insidious series of undiagnosed eating disorders.
I feel like that pressure of like, especially for women, we get fed so many images, especially online and in social media, of that a woman's worth and her value is attributed to what she looks like and how much she gives to other human beings. It's like we are the givers, we're the nurturers, and we're expected to be perfection in all the ways while doing so. So what did that look like for you at the moment when you said it kind of spiraled out of control? What were you doing? How were you living?
It's so interesting because on the outside, I probably still looked quote unquote normal. Like I was still going out with friends. I still was dating and had a boyfriend, and I was doing well in school. I mean, I would probably assume people thought I was getting a little quote unquote too thin, but I looked like I pretty much had it together. And that was the perfectionist in me trying to kind of mask everything that was happening beneath the surface, because beneath the surface, it was this constant ticker tape in my head of, what are you going to eat next? Is that healthy enough? How many calories are in that? And then as I was eating, like, do I feel guilty about eating this? How am I going to have to eat for the rest of the day? Like, what is the scale going to register the next day? Body checking, like because I lived alone at this point. And that's usually when those types of disordered eating voices can be the loudest, is when you're alone and there's no other voice to kind of combat it. Is I was body checking a lot. I had body dysmorphic disorder. So my stomach, like I had to have a six pack. I always wanted a six pack. It had to be totally flat all of the time. And I would pick up my shirt and look in the mirror, and then look in a different mirror, and then look in different lighting, and then lighting on different times of the day. And it was this like lots of almost obsessive compulsive behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because if you look at it from a rational perspective, like nobody's stomach is completely flat all the time. Even people who are in the fitness industry, as the day goes on, you naturally bloat when you eat and you drink. But I was holding myself to this impossibly high standard because I was just so desperate to feel like I was enough in some area of my life when I felt so untethered in other areas of my life.
Yeah, that transition period from college to that career path can be so unstable. It can have us questioning so many different things. You were carrying a huge mental and emotional load with this too. Like when I think of the weight of those thoughts, because I haven't had an eating disorder. I can't even imagine what it was like to have that constantly, but in like little blips of my own life where I was getting fed those kinds of messaging, growing up in the early 2000s, where it was like, you had to be stick thin. It is so much work to be like, okay, how much calories are in this? Okay, I ate this earlier. I need to eat this smaller. Like all of that is just it's so much labor, like mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, especially when you're attributing to your worth. You're attributing your worth to it. So then it's like there's not only is it very time consuming and frustrating, but there's so much pressure on it because it's like your identity is hanging on this thing.
Do you remember getting a lot of comments on your appearance during that time? Like praise for how skinny you looked and how good the clothes were fitting, and oh my gosh, you must, because also like I feel like we so oftentimes look at overweight people and be like, they're unhealthy, but the skinny person, oh, they must be healthy. They must be doing everything right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know what it was is I would eat one way in private, eat like super, super, super quote unquote clean in private. And then I would eat, again, I'm putting quotes around everything, normal, when I would go out to eat with my girlfriends or with my boyfriend. Everyone would be like, oh my God, like you could just eat normally and you're so skinny. Like how is that? Like you're so lucky. And like little did they know what was really happening, behind the scenes. And then, people would compliment like, oh, like, how do you look that way? Like, what do you do for your workouts? And I would love the compliments, but on the inside, like the small, I guess maybe little girl inside of me just wanted to be like, I have an eating disorder. Please help me. Like, you don't want this was kind of what I really wanted to say.
Yeah. So you were kind of aware that what was going on for you was unhealthy.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
how many people knew? Like, were you talking to anybody? Were your doctors or anyone kind of taking notice?
No, not really. My mom knew eventually. And you know what's interesting, Jess? I don't think I really knew until maybe halfway through. I say there was about a 7-year period where I was in this disordered eating disorder phase. And I would say maybe halfway through, I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually an eating disorder. Like, this is what this is. At first, I knew it was a pain in the butt and was obsessive, but I didn't think it was a problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to really mark in this conversation, is this idea that a lot of women think dieting is just normal and skipping breakfast is just normal and
Yeah.
weighing yourself constantly is normal, but it's common, but it's not normal.
It's not healthy to be constantly worrying about other people's opinions about how you look, or even like feeling like if you look a certain way that you won't be valued or that you're not enough.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's something I talk about in the first week of my coaching program, because I have an intuitive eating coaching program.
Yes.
And one of the first things I do with my clients is we tease out this idea of what is diet culture and what is authentic health and what is and isn't healthy. And we have to really kind of think to ourselves, like, is it really healthy if you're genuinely, if a slice of cake genuinely makes you anxious when you're at like your son's birthday party? Is it genuinely healthy that you feel if you eat over your allotted calorie intake that you have to go make that up in the gym? It's just, what is healthy and what isn't healthy is so much more than physical health. It's mental, emotional, spiritual health. It's all of these things. But our culture seems to fixate on appearances and what appears to be healthy, and what appears to be healthy must be healthy. But a lot of times it's anything but. In fact, a lot of times it's the opposite.
And it's also hard because social media and marketing heavily preys upon our insecurities. Like the messages we get, I know you speak of this in some of your text talks, of like the toxicity of the wellness cultures, and like that there's that pressure to be perfect and great, and that it's possible for you if you're just willing to work hard enough for it and try hard enough for it and push through anything. And also like these marketing agencies who are being like, you can be skinny if you just drink shakes all day, and all those toxic messaging.
It's so toxic. And like, there are two things I could say to that. And the first is that, there are a lot of memoirs out there from bikini competitors and people like who really train for these ideal physiques, and they are miserable. They're miserable. They're eating almost nothing. They're training for hours a day. They don't have a social life. Their hormones are out of whack. All of these crazy things are happening to them. They're miserable. And when bikini competitors aren't training for a competition, their bodies, you can't sustain the way that they look all the time. So their bodies change. They go more back to quote unquote normal. And they feel really bummed out during those kind of interim periods because they don't look the way that they know that they can look. But we could all probably, prepare for a bikini competition. We all probably could get a six-pack if we tried hard enough. But I think, and we'll talk about this in my pivotal moment, is that worth it?
And also, like, at what cost? Like, at what cost? Yeah.
Exactly. The cost is extremely high. And I mean, I guess it's to each their own, and it varies person to person. But I had to ask myself, is this body that I want really worth it? And am I pursuing it in the right way? But to your other point, the dieting industry and the marketing that we receive in magazines and media and social media, it's a business. Their business is to get our money. So why would they create something that would work on the first try? Because they would run out of money. They've created a system. They've created dieting that is so unsustainable that, of course, it backfires. Of course, we fail on it. And then we think it's our fault because that's what the messaging tells us. And then we buy more products. We buy $733 a year worth of diet and weight loss products.
That's a statistic? Like, that's an actual statistic?
That's a real statistic.
That's so depressing to hear. That's so sad to hear. And I think it's also important, like, although we are two women having this conversation, it's also important to acknowledge, like, men are not immune to this as well. Like, men also get hit by these same messages and these same cultures to look a certain way in order to appear masculine and strong and all of those things. So when did you really, like, when did you realize that this was a problem? Like, this was unhealthy and that you needed to start making some changes?
There were a couple of pivotal moments that I really remember. One of them was I was following this blog by this girl. I don't know. She was in upstate New York, and she was like a fitness and recipe blogger. So she was like very fit, and she had all these beautiful recipes, and all the pictures were perfect, and she was beautiful, and her husband was good looking, and had this little cute life together. And I kind of really looked up to her, and it was one of those things. And I read her blog every week, and she looked like her life was perfect. And then I read one post from her that she had been diagnosed with hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is when you lose your menstrual cycle, you lose your period because you're literally not getting enough nutrients in your body for it to function properly. So what happens when you restrict your calories is your body will decide what are the most important functions to keep going and what can we shut down in order to conserve energy. So obviously things like your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your brain can keep that going, but secondary functions like your menstrual cycle, it's going to shut off. So she's diagnosed with HA. She's told she needs to gain 15 to 20 pounds so that she can start trying to start their family. She's trying to conceive, and she was having a whole lot of trouble. And it was very jarring for me because I was only 22, 23 at the time when I read that. So I wasn't personally ready for a family, but I knew I wanted one in the future. And it was just this moment of twofold. It was one, oh my gosh, like I could be putting so much strain on my body that I might not be able to have children, which was very scary for me. And number two was the realization that I'd been looking up to this girl thinking she was so perfect and had the perfect life, but it really wasn't the case. She was kind of where I was in terms of this restriction and not fueling her body enough. And it just was, looks are very deceiving. And that was one moment for me for certain. And then the other moment that really sticks out for me is the day that I got on the scale and I was 100 pounds. And I don't like using numbers a lot as a intuitive eating coach, but I think in terms of this story and having it be powerful and relatable for readers or for listeners to hear is I'm 5'4". I should not be 100 pounds. Like, even though BMI, I can go on a whole tangent about body mass index being a crock of poop.
For an adult woman of 5'4", that is very
definitely not enough.
100
definitely not enough. And I felt a couple of different things in that moment. I felt I hate to admit it, a sick sense of accomplishment in one respect. And then in another respect, I felt a sense of fear because I knew that was way too low. I knew I was starving my body. And then I had a light bulb moment with that fear and with that sick sense of satisfaction of, I still don't love my body. So when is it going to be enough? It wasn't enough that, 108 wasn't 105, 100, it wasn't 100. Like, what is it really going to take double digits for me to love myself? And I finally realized that I've been chasing the wrong thing the whole time. I was chasing a goal weight. I was chasing a size, and it was never going to be that thing. And there might be listeners right now saying, well, no matter how you cut that story, Alana, you were still thin. It's like, what does it matter? Like, who cares? Like, you're still lucky enough to be thin. And yeah, in a lot of ways, I'm in a straight size body. I'm in a thin body naturally. And I live in a society that values thinner bodies over larger bodies. I understand that. But at the same time, the story still shows that it doesn't matter the weight, because it wasn't going to be a weight that was going to make me happy with myself. I realized I had to find a different way to do that.
It doesn't matter what you look like. When you have an eating disorder, the things that are happening in your brain and how you perceive yourself, you could be rich and skinny, have the personal trainer, and you could still be hating your body, and you could still feel like you're not good enough based on how you look, and you could still have that body dysmorphia. Like it doesn't matter. So I hope that no one is judging you for that in this moment. And thank you for acknowledging it though, because I feel like maybe there are people who think that, and just if you are, you're wrong. So let's correct that right now. So it sounds like that was quite the light bulb moment for you. Like it was like, this number, when is this going to be good enough? I love that you were able to ask yourself that question in that moment, but there's no way that this just changed for you just like that. Like, I'm sure that there was a progression, because like, how long had you been, you said 7 years of living this way, of talking to yourself in a negative way about your body, I'm sure, and looking at those numbers and counting those calories. So where did you even begin to start transitioning to a healthier lifestyle?
It's so interesting. And I talk about this transition in the book because this would never be something that I would suggest for a client, but this is my real life and my real experience. So I have to speak about it in the book, and I'll speak about it here as well. Is I actually found, I'm not going to name the company, but it's a fitness company that also has eating plans, and they have like the portion control containers. And they assign you a coach, and I got a coach, and my coach, looking back on it, was extremely orthorexic. She actually admitted to me she was scared to eat out at a restaurant. Like, she had to cook all of her meals so that she could be in control of them. But that's neither here nor there.
Is that the definition of orthorexic? I've never heard that before.
Yes. So orthorexic or orthorexia is when you are obsessed with clean eating, quote unquote, right? It's you have to only eat healthy foods. You would never eat a donut, and the idea of doing that would cause you like a lot of anxiety, or cause you to want to make up for that food in some way, either by restricting later on or adding in more exercise or anything like that. So,
I see. Okay.
So I ended up on this portion control container plan, and that was my intermediary step to recovery, just because although it was still very rigid in terms of like, you have to eat this many carbs and this many fats and this many whatever, and you have to like stay within the parameters of your plan or whatever, at least I was giving my body way more than I had been giving it.
Yeah.
So I would say I was eating about 50% more calories on this plan than I was before. Like, I was eating so little before. I don't even want to, I was eating like 900 calories a day. Like, it was really bad. So at least that program left me feeling safe in that I was eating more what was appropriate for my body size. And the interesting thing about it was the number on the scale went up to what was a little bit more appropriate, but the way my body looked was actually better. Which was like kind of like the crazy part of it all, is that all of a sudden I was giving my body enough nutrients to build muscle and to have my metabolism rev back up again. Because when I was restricting so heavily, when people diet and put themselves in a calorie deficit, their metabolism slows all the way down. It deregulates because it's trying to conserve energy in order to survive. It has no idea that you're dieting. It thinks that there's a famine or a period of starvation that it has to prepare for, the way that a bear like prepares for winter. Yes. So your metabolism is super sluggish. Your body is eating away at your muscle when you restrict your calories. So all of a sudden I'm eating all of these calories, my metabolism is firing up and building all this muscle, and I start to actually look and feel better eating more. And it was like it blew my mind. But again, I was still in an intermediary step because I found safety in the structure. I found safety in the idea of like, okay, you expert outside of me, tell me what I need for my own body, and I'll feel safe, because otherwise I might binge or I might overeat and gain all this weight. So you, company, tell me what I need to do and take my money.
So I have 2 questions about that. One, was your coach aware that you were struggling with an eating disorder at the time? And 2, was it hard for you to start allowing yourself to eat that much food? Like, do you remember, because you said you basically doubled what you were eating before, which can be really challenging for people who struggle with eating disorders. Like, do you remember if it was difficult for you to start eating those meals at the beginning?
Um, you know, honestly, it wasn't, because I think I had a quick realization that I wanted to be fit. Like that was kind of always the main goal.
Mm.
And I thought I was going to get fit by having the number go down. But once I kind of saw this program and started reading on how I needed to eat more to gain the muscle to look the way that I wanted to, I felt safe in following a program that was going to help me get there. So I was actually okay with it. And I also started to notice that when I did eat more, I binged less, which
Makes
led me
sense.
to realize, yeah, well, I didn't realize I had binge eating disorder. It was, Monday through Friday, I used to be so clean and, meticulous with caloring my calories. And it was a super low number that by the time the weekend hit, and I have a cocktail or two with my girlfriends, my inhibitions would be lowered. I'd be like, I deserve all of the food. And I would open the floodgates, but then I wouldn't be able to stop. And
Right.
then you feel so bad about that you're like, well, starting Monday, I'm going to be, I'm going to be back on the horse. So once I started eating more, my body was getting enough energy, getting enough calories. My body started to trust that I was going to give it the nourishment that it needed. It pulled back on the binging because it didn't need to have that as a survival mechanism anymore. So that was another reason why I was kind of okay with following this plan, is the binging was stopping a little bit.
And did your expert who was helping you aware of? No.
No, you know what? I wasn't at the point where I was ready to talk about it, and I was still kind of figuring out what exactly I had and what exactly was wrong with me, because I was too afraid to go seek help. I was too afraid to tell a doctor about it. Actually, in fact, here's a good one. I ended up with high cholesterol because of my eating disorder, which can happen. And I went to the doctor, and he was talking to me about like my most recent blood work, and he says to me, "Well, just don't smoke and eat well and exercise." And it's like, that is so triggering for somebody who has an eating disorder, but he didn't know.
Yeah.
But
you would
that's
hope
a whole nother
doctor, like you're the person though, like who's going to be the most helpful person for you in that moment? You would think your doctor, but he didn't even think to recognize where you might be at or to evaluate you. And like at the time, do you think he would have been able to see that something was wrong based on how skinny you were?
No, I mean, no one ever said anything to me. None of my doctors ever said anything to me. It wasn't like I wasn't getting regular checkups in these 7 years, but not once did anybody think anything was wrong. And that's an entire another conversation that we can have, Jess, about like weight centric medical care. We won't go there today.
Do you remember wishing someone noticed though? Like, do you remember, like, I feel like you said this somewhere earlier in this, of sometimes when we're in so much pain or hurting, like we just wish that someone would knew how much we were hurting. Like, do you ever, or were you like very protective and like trying very hard to hide what was happening for you internally?
I was trying very hard to hide it because, well, you know what? My mom noticed. My mom was definitely like, "You're looking really skinny." And part of me was, and then I was out loud, I'd be like, "No, I'm not, I'm fine." And then internally, I was actually like happy to hear that. And I think part of the reason I was happy to hear that was because I always wanted like a weight buffer for when I would binge eat. Like, oh, well, I'm, X amount of pounds underweight. So if I binge eat, it won't really matter. You know what I mean? But my eating disorders were partially born out of maladaptive perfectionism. Like, I'm a perfectionist, and I totally own that, and that's fine. But there's like adaptive perfectionism where you're using it for good and high achieving, and it's striving in a healthy way. And then there's like, the maladaptive destructive perfectionism. And I didn't want anybody to think that there was anything wrong with me. I wanted to figure it out on my own how to heal, because I didn't want anyone to know I ever had a problem in the first place.
Mm-hmm. When you were going through your healing and you were starting to eat more and move towards a healthier lifestyle, What mental and emotional hurdles did you encounter in that growth transition?
Quite a few. I mean, I really had to get over the fear of what would happen when I gained weight. And I had to eventually get over the fear of what would happen if I began to eat intuitively, because along my journey, I found podcasts about intuitive eating. And it like blew my mind to know that there was a subculture of women who had consciously decided they were not going to diet. They were not going to try to control their weight. They were still going to pursue health, but they weren't going to do this in this rigid way that has all these food rules and conditions and shoulds. And I wanted to be that person. I wanted to be the person who could just eat what she wanted and listen to her body and nourish it the way that it needed to, and not worry about where the weight was going to fall, and still have confidence in herself no matter where it fell. And letting go of the control that I thought I had over my body shape and size was very, very scary. Not weighing myself was very, very scary. I'd weighed myself every day in the morning for years and years and years. And then I decided I have to stop this, because if I know the number, I'm going to try to manipulate it. So I have to step off the scale. That was another one. When I go to the doctor, they're like, all right, step on the scale. And I go, no, thank you. So they kind of give me like if they don't know me already, they kind of give me an inquisitive look, like if they're like a new nurse. They're like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't even tell them why. I just say no, thank you.
Fair. And they respect it? They don't challenge you on it?
They do. I mean, sometimes they're like, why? And I just say, I just don't want to. And I don't feel like I have to dignify them with a response. Like, clearly I've made a platform of my eating disorder, so I have no problem telling people my story, but I don't feel like it's really anyone's business why or why not we don't want to get on the scale or be a part of that world. So I don't even dignify it with it.
Fair enough. Do you remember who you leaned on for support during this time? Like, when did you start talking to people and telling people, and who supported you through it?
Really, honestly, really my husband the most. He was the person I probably told first. I think I relied a lot. And I'm an only child, so I have only child syndrome for sure. So I try to do everything on my own. I'm very independent. So I didn't really tell anybody that much while I was going through it, except for my mom and my husband. Those were the two people I would talk to about it a lot. Like, my mom definitely received the same type of message over and over and over again, which is that's what recovery is. It's not linear. It's very cyclical. You make the same mistakes over and over again until you finally get that muscle memory to make the right decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. Growth and change is definitely not a linear path. It is all over the place. Wins, fails, ups, downs, turning back around, like all the time. I'm glad that you had at least a couple people in your life who you could lean on for support as you navigated this change.
Absolutely. And even the podcast, like, eventually you listen to enough episodes of somebody's podcast, you start to feel like they're like your friend and you're like the unintended mentor.
Yeah, that's great. Like, those are the best kinds of podcast ones, like the ones that make you feel good and you listen to it and you feel seen and heard, and like you have a community that understands you. I'm glad that you found that podcast for yourself. Do you remember the name of it?
There were a couple. I don't remember the very first one, but the Dear Body podcast with Jessie Jean was a really big one. How to Love Your Body by the Body Love Society. The Fuck It Diet by Caroline Dooner. Food Psych by Christy Harrison. Those were, I think, my top 4 at the time. And I would just cycle through those episodes, listen to old episodes. And it was great because it was like cognitive behavioral therapy, or I forget what it's called, what kind of therapy where like you just repeat the same things over and over again. But that was kind of what it was like. It was the same messages over and over again from different people that was kind of rewiring my brain to think a different way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like, knowing that how we speak to ourselves matter, like words are spells, they're magic. So kind of flooding your brain with the things that you needed to train your brain to hear. That makes sense to me, at least. So where are you now? What's life like for you now? And how do you feel about your body today?
Life is awesome. I mean, listen, I have my own demons that I'm still working through in therapy. I have my, it's still a journey. I'm still working on making my perfectionism a little more adaptive and to serve me. And, I still am working on things like boundaries with technology and social media. So I still have my own things happening, but in terms of food and weight, I don't know what I weigh. I enjoy working out and movement and exercise and strength training. And I love eating nourishing foods, but I also love the junk foods or play foods that both of them have a place in my life right now. I pursue health, I pursue nutrition and fitness, but it's done in such a more flexible and intuitive way. I've finally learned how to listen to my body and what it needs and what it doesn't need. And it's freed up so much mental energy and emotional energy.
Yeah, you were carrying a heavy load at the beginning of this podcast.
I really was. It was, and I'm starting to speak to female businesses and female entrepreneurs about the time, money, and energy that we waste when we diet. There was a point in time where I was working at a high school making $30,000 a year, and I told a colleague that I would be happy to stay there and retire at $30,000 a year for like the next 40 years. And like, there's nothing wrong with $30,000 a year for anybody, but the fact that I was like 24 and I was like, no, I'm cool to just stay right here forever. Like, I have no intention of growth or evolution or anything like that, because I was too exhausted. I had so much brain fog from not eating that I couldn't imagine a life bigger than the one that I was living. And now life is so much different. Like, between my job and my business, like I make over six figures. I did a TED Talk. I wrote a book. They're actually publishing my book. Like, they actually thought it was good enough. So like, things have changed so much. I have a family now. I have a son now. I was able to have a healthy baby, and things are just so much more free and so much more on my own terms. I couldn't really ask for more.
The energy that you just gave right there just makes it so crystal clear how much happier you are in your life right now. Like, you just lit the fuck up talking about everything that's going on in your life right now. And for good reason. You've got so much good happening, and not one of those things had to do with your weight. And you
and that's the crazy thing. The crazy thing is I have all of these beautiful things in my life, and it wouldn't matter if I weigh what I weigh now or 50 pounds more, 100, I could still have those exact things. And I think that we wait, I think especially women, but men too, we wait until we look a certain way in order to show up the way that we want to show up. And we're going to be waiting forever. Like, just do the dang thing, because you don't know how much time you have, and this life is so precious. So just do it.
I have two questions. I always have two questions, it seems. One is, because you just mentioned you had a baby, and we know that having babies, for women especially, changes our bodies. Like, we get the big belly, and then the post trying to feel good in our bodies again. There's so many body changes. Was that a trigger in any way for you? Did you have to rework through some of your body image things during that time, or were you having enough support and had been so far in your progress that you were strong enough to manage that transition at that time?
It's funny, because I was worried about that too, and it ended up being okay. It ended up actually making me respect my body even more, because of the things that it was able to do were just incredible to watch. And my labor was 38 hours, which is a long time. I know, it was intense. And I was like, oh my God, like, I survived that. Like, my body went through that. I made a whole fucking human being, and like, it's in the world. And I, there's such a pressure to get your body back after, because, we see these celebrities who get tummy tucks after their C-sections, and then they're like, oh, look at me. And I have to say, and this is not like a plug, like, oh, if you eat intuitively, you'll get your body back right away. But I was like, I looked back to normal for the most part within like 2 months. And I didn't do a damn thing differently. I didn't do anything differently. I didn't count calories. I didn't work out more. I didn't do anything. I mean, granted, I was, breastfeeding like a machine, so there was some of that probably. But like, it just like, it was miraculous that I had let go of the control and my body just went back to the way that it was always supposed to be. Like, I didn't have to do a damn thing for it to happen. And yeah, I actually like my body better now than before I had kids.
Yeah.
But I will say, I do have loose skin around my stomach and that's not, I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. It's not like I can tone up. It's skin. Yes. And I had a really big beach belly. So, but it's a reminder. It's like, that was my son's name is Archer. That was Archer's first home. Like, he lived in there, and like, I can't, oh, thank you. I can't hate it. Like, I love it. It's a wonderful reminder how we were one person at one time, and I love it.
Yeah, I'm really hearing it wasn't triggering anything for you. You were really appreciating what your body was doing in that moment, growing a human, being able to survive 34 hours of labor. Like
38, man.
No, thank you. That scares me. Like you have an appreciation for your body now.
Absolutely. But let me tell you, when he asks why he's an only child, that's going to be definitely part of the story.
I think that's enough said. You just say 38 hours. Okay. 38 hours. That's why you're an only child, Archer.
Yeah.
Which is a great name. So what are you hoping? Okay. Actually, what message do you have for anyone who might be listening right now, who is struggling with body image, eating disorders, or body dysmorphia right now?
There is nothing to be ashamed of. There is not a damn thing to be ashamed of. If you need help, you have to tell somebody. You have to reach out to a professional, whether it's a coach like me or a dietitian or a therapist, or just it breathes and it lives in isolation. And nobody wants to talk about how fucked up they feel around food and their body, because they feel like they should have it all together and they should just that they should be just losing weight and it should be easy, and what's wrong with them. And it's such a nuanced problem, and there's so many different reasons people can have issues with food in so many different ways that, like, I just want everybody to know there's nothing wrong with you at all. There's so many of us struggling with it, most of us in the dark, and the sooner you can admit that there's an issue and find the appropriate help, find someone to be in your corner, find someone ideally who has been where you are now, you're going to feel a million times better. I get on coaching consultations with people, and sometimes even if people don't sign up for my program, I hear a lot on the conversations like, I feel so much better after this call, because they've simply told their story finally, instead of pretending like it wasn't a problem.
Talking about it, just saying it out loud is a huge step in healing, period. Like, just being able to say those words and talk about it is massive. And if anyone is listening to this and like knows that they need to work with you and they want to see more about your work and get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
So my website is freedomwithfoodandfitness.com. I am very active on Instagram at Freedom with Food and Fitness. So the book is also called Freedom with Food and Fitness. And yeah, that's really it. Come say hi. If you're interested in coaching, we can talk about that too. Really, really whatever you guys want. I'm here.
And I will have all of your links in the episode description below, so people don't have to guess on how to find you. Just go to the episode description, click, and connect with Alana today. Alana, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and coming on to share your story. I'm sure that there is someone, at least one person, who needs to hear this journey, and I know it will help a lot of people. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and letting us know your thoughts in the comments below. It truly means the world to me to hear from you. New episodes will be available every Saturday, both on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about my work as a coach, today's guest, or have a story that you would like to share on the Pivot Point, check out the episode description for more information. Now, time for the legal stuff. This podcast is presented to you solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I may be a professionally certified coach myself, but hosting a podcast is not coaching. This podcast should not be used in substitution of working with a licensed therapist, doctor, coach, or other qualified professionals. Copy that? Amazing. See you on the next episode. Nothing but love, Jess.